Real quick before we start, guys, I want to mention the HPO Corvette Exchange program. If you go to the horsepowerobsessed.com website, you can see right there at the top middle, HPO Corvette Exchange, or if you scroll down a little bit, you'll actually see the 2 featured Corvettes for sale. These are for sale for you to buy and or sell. If you want to sell a car or buy a car, feel free to reach out to us. If you go to the top and actually select HPO Corvette Exchange, all the information is here, but more importantly, the email address you're going to want to reach out to is right there. We can sell your Corvette or get you a good price on a Corvette. Please reach out if you're looking for a Corvette or trying to sell yours. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Horsepower Obsessed. Today we are greeted with 2 guests, both of which are fantastic people, but one of which has not been on this channel before, and he has come to answer a lot of really good questions about Nurburgring times, magnetic ride control updates, all kinds of stuff. He's kind of the man, the myth, the legend himself. He doesn't want to be called that, but that's what he is in our heads, like, at least. So he is Jim MERO alongside Joe here from Solar Performance. Joe, tell us how this all happened today.
Sure. So thanks, Justin, for having me again. And Jim, thanks so much for taking me up on the offer. Jim and I were having a conversation yesterday, and we segued into the whole ZR1 and then obviously the X launch. And then, Jim was, just giving me some great, education on all his various experiences that everybody on this channel probably knows all too well. I was trying to write feverishly, and I said, you know what? I got a better idea. Why don't I see if Jim will share his knowledge and expertise, as he was doing with me as one person, much more broadly. So I reached out to you, Justin, and here we are a day later.
It's a pleasure finally to see you guys face to face.
So, guys, what we're going to answer today is the C8 Corvette ZR1 Nurburgring time. Jim has a pretty good idea of what that could be. The ZR1X Nurburgring time, pretty good idea of that as well. We're also going to talk about some C7 Corvettes because he actually was the driver in that car on the Nurburgring. So he has a real good idea of what these cars are capable of. So we're going to answer all kinds of questions today. Some of this is going to be a little bit of speculation, but from what I understand, Jim's mathematical equations to getting these times are pretty freaking accurate. So even though it is not going to be 100% fact, odds are good we're going to be very close. So again, Jim, just like Joe said, thank you for coming on the channel here. We really appreciate it. Let's just kick this thing off and ask the question that the majority of the people want to know, and that's going to be the C8 ZR1. What do you think it's capable of on the Nurburgring?
I mean, I've seen a lot of speculation out there. What I did was I looked at I had the luxury of having 3 lap times on the Nürburgring with 3 different sets of horsepower in cars that had the exact same body, the exact same tires. That would be the C7 Grand Sport, the C7 Z06, and the C7 ZR1. So then I could compare those 3 times, and then I could get basically a horsepower per second gain with increased horsepower because I don't have any other variables. And I mean, there's variables, there's weight, and this is fairly crude, but I've used this in the past, and it's been probably within 5%, maybe less, to what we actually got. When I compared those 3 times, and then I had to then speculate on what the C7 Z06 or the C8 Z06 actual time, which the car's way faster than 710. I just got to believe that. That car should be under 7 minutes. Using the times, not only that we got from the C7s, but I use with one set of calculations, I used the 710. I think the car's 658-ish, maybe even faster. And then when you supply those, then when you roll those scale factors into the C8, I'm looking at my data right now. Probably the times I used were the C7 Grand Sport at a 727, the C7 Z06 at a 710, and the C7 ZR1 at I just did it at 7 minutes. I got delta horsepowers. The scale factors, believe it or not, horsepower to scale factor, Grand Sport to Z06 was 10.9, Z06 to ZR1 was 10.5, Grand Sport to ZR1 was 10.7, so it's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
And then if I put the C8 Z06 in a 7-minute lap and use that scale factor, then I get a 623. But then you look at some of the other cars out there, and I'm like, well, maybe, that's not too far off. Realistically, I think the car should easily be under 630. I'm probably going to get in a lot of trouble for saying that, but it's speculation.
Sure.
But with some background,
Right.
If I look at the C7 ZR1 with those tires and 300 more horsepower, I wouldn't be hoping for a 640 something. Then you look at what Porsche's doing, GT3 RS, GT2 RS. I think a 630 is doable. It's easy to sit here in my living room and do that, but right. If I was still gainfully employed and one of the guys trying to cut this lap, I'd say the same thing. If Taj were to ask me, what do you think? And he did every time we went, what do you think it'll do? And I told him. And if he asked me what it would do, I would say 630.
And you were pretty consistently right about that in the past.
I was pretty consistent. Yeah, I was within a second or two.
Wow. So we talked about this a second ago off camera, but because I have a C7 ZR1, I've always kind of followed the times that you had put down with the C7 ZR1. And when the 7-minute 4-second came out, some people were, and I'll put this in quotes because, it's still a ridiculously good time, disappointed by the 7 minutes, 4 seconds. They wanted it to crack 7 minutes and be under, 650-ish. And we talked about this off the screen, but I had read a quote from you saying at the time that with properly warmed up tires and everything that you felt that the C7 ZR1 was definitely capable of a sub 7-minute time. Tell me a little bit about that and why you weren't able to get a sub 7-minute time with that car.
Well, first of all, I can tell you one thing. There was nobody in this planet more disappointed in not getting under 7 minutes than me. And it's not because I was looking for glory. I was looking for validation of the car.
Yeah.
Validation of the engineers working on the car. We never released a C7 time, yet we have them all. And then, they go into why we didn't for all those cars, and they're all really good times. And that was the final hurrah. I knew I was retiring, and it broke my heart that we couldn't get the car under 7 minutes when I knew damn well it would go under 7 minutes. Just giving you history, the way I always ran a fast lap was they had what they called last lap of the day. And this is during the industry pool. And you had to sign up for it. It was really tough to get. Yet we had Patrick Herman, who was just one of the best liaisons we ever had. And Patrick's still with GM working with those guys over there, but he was able to get us a couple of shots at it, a fast lap. And then during industry pool, it's supposed to end at 5:30. So at 5:10, they say, okay, this is the last lap for industry pool traffic. And then that's not my dog. No, I'm just kidding. And then the safety car would go out and I would follow the safety car. And so the safety car is making sure the track's clear from all the cars that were in the industry pool. And then on the long straightaway, the safety car would wave me by so I can go start the lap. And then the safety car would then do another lap to make sure if I didn't walk, if I augured it in, they would be there to help. It's 13 miles through the mountains. Every single time I drove on the Nurburgring, you always did a warm-up lap to get the tires. I wanted them at perfect operating temperatures. When I started just started a hot lap, and I had it down to a science. I knew exactly. You just don't, pull out, and go crazy. You just slowly build them up. And I had, each corner, okay, here's a test, wide open throttle, second gear, do they hook up and things like that. And that's the way I was expecting to run the C7 ZR1. In 2018, they decided because the industry pool is only 7 days over 2 weeks, 3.5 days a week. And then you lose part of those because of weather almost every time. So because it was so difficult, because so many people wanted to run for time, they said, we're going to forget the last lap, no more last laps. And the second Wednesday of the industry pool session of that month, they were going to do a 2-hour session that anybody can sign up for. And depending on how many cars you had, how many manufacturers, you would get X amount of laps for time. And at the time, I'm thinking, well, that's cool. I might even get, instead of just 1 lap, I might get 2 or 3. And so we were an hour before our segment and our fast lap time on that Wednesday, and Patrick came back and said, hey, there's a change in protocol. They just had a meeting. Instead of starting up at the industry pool pit, which is right by the start line, you're gonna grid, or you're gonna pit at where the public pits for their public lapping, which is like the bridge to gantry thing. It's in between the two bridges, so they can't run the entire straightaway. And there will be no warm up lap. And then they were going to run a chicane at the start finish line. And we're just, I mean, we were like the Keystone Cops. We're looking at each other going, what the hell? You know, so we just start, you know, we had a plan of, you know, one guy was going to bring a car back, put new tires and get it back up there. And we, you know, and now it's just throwing shit into vans and going up there and trying to get set up. And basically that, you know, we had 3/4 of a mile and 3 turns on cold tires just when we started the lap for time. And that was the 7:04 lap. When you heat tires, when you pre-warm them, we could have pre-warmed them, but it takes 6 hours. You bring them up slowly. You got to get the tread, the carcass, the brakes, the wheels. Everything has to be up to operating temperature. And we did it with slip angle, which just basically glazed the tread. And, you know, the car was just a handful.
So if you
for the entire lap.
If you were able to properly warm up those tires, what I know, you know, obviously I'm not holding you to it, but what do you think?
My segments was 657 with the Grand Sport, and with the Z06, I beat the segment by 1 to 2 seconds.
Okay.
So, you know, I'm not saying, you know, it's like everything's got to be perfect, but I really, you know, I think, I mean, I see the reason I couldn't have matched the segment, because the segments are done during industry pool when you're running around with, you know, hundreds of cars and you have no idea how fast you're going, because when you come up on a slower car, which, you know, and like these guys going through, they're there now. You're the fastest car out there. You'll do a warm up lap thinking I'm by myself out here, and then you go hot, and it's like you know 20, 30 times during lap, but you can't pass them until they signal you by.
Right.
So you're, you know, you have no idea. Well, you know, with these segment times, and we had a real brilliant guy write the program. Then over the day we could start piecing together. It was 42 segments, and the segment was never like, we didn't divide a turn in half so you get an unrealistic segment, like, you know, turn into apex, and then the second half segment is apex to corner out. It was either the entire corner or a set of corner. We broke it into 42 segments, so they were very accurate. And then over time you can get an idea of what the car could run. The funny thing was, well, you don't go for a year and you show up. I remember this was in the C6 ZR1. I came in after my first, I go, man, I'm hauling ass. And my engineer goes, you know, Jeff Mosher goes, no, you're not. You're like 10 seconds slower than you were last year on the different tires. Yeah. And then just over time, everything starts clicking. It's a daunting track. And it's awesome. So, but if you just forget how much, you know, how narrow it is, and there's no runoff, and you just got, you know, it takes a day or two just to get all that out of your system. Right. So you're ringing the car out like you would at VIR.
I've never been there, but it's called the Green Hell for a reason, I would imagine.
It's unbelievable. It's the best place on earth.
So the 6:57 segment time, you think roughly a second or two you could have beat that by? So let's say 6:55. You're pretty confident with that time?
Well, yeah, I'll say based on past history, with the segment times that I was within I always beat them by second, maybe two. But I see no reason. I mean, I had a lot of laps in that car, so I see no reason that I couldn't have at least matched what I did in the other two cars with the ZR1.
Okay, that's great.
So Jim, it sounds like based on that story, it's pretty incredible that a 704, frankly, was.
When I was running the lap, I thought this is going to be like a 615. It's going to be over 610. And I came around a corner. It was 605 on the PDR, but the chicane was, because the chicane started at the official start line, I had to go through. So I think we estimated that based on data, it was like 1.2 to 1.5 seconds. So that's where we come up with the 704.
So we've talked about the ZR1, the C8 ZR1. You're thinking rough. We'll just round it to under 630. Do you think, based on what you know, and I know there's a lot more variables to factor in with the ZR1X because of the hybrid setup, but do you think on the Nurburgring the ZR1X would be faster or slower based on the extra weight and stuff of the hybrid setup?
Well, that depends on, you know, there's three things I like to understand about these three modes for the racetrack. They have a qualifying mode. Well, how many? I'm assuming a qualifying mode is the full 186 horsepower. So for how long of a lap? I mean, will I be able to get 186 at the Nurburgring? Something tells me probably not. Or the endurance mode, how is that broken up? Is it just 186 off the turns, and then you're kind of lugging around all that weight on the straightaways? And then the push to pass, I'm assuming that, they can't make any more than 186. So if you're going to use push to pass, it means you're running at 1064, and then you're using the hybrids and the push to pass. And then once you use it up, you're done, which, I can understand the Formula One car, there's other things out there doing it. But the question is, without this full qualifying lap, how long of a track? My guess is probably 3 miles, that then you're lugging around. And I don't know the weight of this hybrid system, but you're lugging around the weight of the hybrid system on the front of the car. Well, I know the battery packs are in the middle. So I just don't know how that would affect the handling and things like that. If I were to guess the Nürburgring, I don't think they can run 13.8 miles with the full 186. My guess is the regular ZR1 would be faster.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Based on some of the things I've heard, like we talked about before we started recording here, I think that's accurate. But I think you're 3 to 4 miles on full charge. And I know the push to pass is full 186 regardless of charge status of that battery. So if you're down to 3%, it's going to give you the 186 for as long as it can. And typically it wouldn't at that percentage normally. That's why the push to pass will give you full power.
Maybe they're holding some in the reserve for maybe a couple of second burst.
Something like that,
yeah.
So, Jim, here's a question for you. A bunch of my friends in the Corvette Club play some of these driving games once a month. Just beers and just seeing who can do the best times. And obviously, the ring is one of the ones that's an option for us, as well as many other racetracks. But when we're all under quote unquote pressure to try and beat each other, it's not anything like A, the real thing, and B, I'm just trying to get at how much pressure did you feel knowing that you literally were the end result, or in many ways, the face of Corvette, at these tracks where everybody's efforts and engineering and many years of development would come down to, in many ways, people judge numbers, right? And it's not totally why they buy our Corvettes, right? But everyone's competitive and everyone wants to know, how does this car stack up? So I think of you, and the drivers for any manufacturer, you're really the quarterback, and it's 4th and 2 from the 3-yard line, and everybody's effort is gone, getting them to the 97 yards to that point over the many years of development. How do you, when you're starting that hot lap, what the hell is going through your head?
It's funny. When guys are running like the Cadillacs, I told them, you think you're running just another lap. You make that first turn and it's all different. You go to a place that you've never been in, like an industry pool lap. And industry pool, like I was talking before, you run hard, and this is why I could beat the segments, but it's always in your mind. There's other cars out there, and you're always leaving a little bit on the table because it's, well, first of all, you're doing development, all right? So you're trying to drive at 98 or 99% consistently so you can A/B your shock changes, your bar changes, whatever it is you're trying to evaluate or develop. But I said, the pressure, I'm kind of a nonchalant, I'm a blue collar engineer. I never let it get to me because it'll take you down. I'm like, this is how this is going to happen, and we're going to do the best we can. I put a lot of pressure on myself because driving is something I've been doing all my life, and it's this validation of this skill you've been trying to refine since you were, a teenager. So that was just me doing it to myself. But the biggest thing is I didn't want to let Taj and Harlan and the entire platform, all the engineers, down by not, and that was what broke my heart on the C7 ZR1. Was I knew we could do it. I'll tell you a quick story. When we were running this 2-hour session, there was a bunch of manufacturers up there. Lamborghini's out on the public roads trying to warm the tires. They apparently got a lot of complaints because then they come in and try to go, and we're all just looking with our hands up. And then we said, okay, let's put them in warmers for an hour and see what it does. But there was a time when there was a lull in the action because, nobody's wanted to run. This is maybe a year later, I was thinking to myself, I should have gone out and done I'm going to go for time and just done a warm-up lap. And just came off that and gone right back out because it might have been open and I could have done what I wanted to do, the hot lap. And it was a year later when I thought of this, and I'm like, I got sick to my stomach because I'm like, why didn't you think of that? But it was complete chaos. Why didn't you think of it at time to do something like that? Because I probably could have got away with it.
Yeah. So one thing that all of us think about, and I hear this all the time on my channel, is, GM's over at the Nurburgring. Why haven't we got times yet? Why haven't we this? Why haven't we that? Tell us about just how chaotic the time is over there.
It's okay. First, here's the deal. First, the 7 days. Okay, so it's 7 days over 2 weeks. Okay, 3.5 days a week. On a normal week, you'll lose a day and a half to rain, and then when the stops raining, the track is never fully dry. Right. We got when we were doing the C7s, we got skunked. We were there for 2 weeks, and we actually had several opportunities, and we got skunked. I mean, if you remember when Adam Dean ran the Z28, not the ZR1, not the 1LE. It was like a 720 something or 730. I don't remember what it was, but he finished the lap in the wet. I was about a minute and a half behind him in the Z51, and it was like 1, 2, dry track, 3, completely wet. You come around a corner and it's just completely wet. The weather is probably the biggest hindrance of getting, and it's not only getting the lap, it's getting up to speed. So I always do this example of how hard it is to get yourself in a car dialed in at the Nurburgring. Any Nurburgring expert will tell you it takes 30 to 50 laps to get into the window, and it takes probably another 30 to 50 to be perfect. And compare that to Virginia National Raceway. Okay, right. So if I go to Virginia National Raceway and one day I can run 6 tanks of fuel, I'll see every turn 90 times. When I go to Nurburgring, 1 tank of fuel is 2 laps. So if I run 6 tanks of fuel, I see every turn 12 times, and there's 150 of them, or 130, whatever the real number is. Even at VIR, we'll show up after 6 or 8 months or a year, and we'll start running, and then 2 days later, we're running 3 seconds faster. Yeah. Just out of repetition. So if you look at those number of laps compared to the equal Nurburgring laps, it's a lot longer to get completely dialed in on a car for perfection.
Now, you were the one that drove the ZR1 on the VIR and accidentally broke the Ford GT record, right?
Yeah.
Yep. That was awesome.
Yep. No, it was the same car at the Nurburgring.
Yeah. Was that an auto?
Yes.
Okay.
See that? I always told you, Justin, autos are faster.
Yeah, here we go, Joe.
No, it's the auto. Well, the auto did a better job, but I tell people it was like, when I embraced rev matching, which I didn't at first. And when you're running a qualifying lap, it's just one less thing you got to deal with.
Right.
Either rev matching and the auto. I wasn't convinced on the auto at first, but when they proved it to me, then I was all in.
Yeah, I mean, I've said the same thing as far as like taking the car to the track or even a drag strip. The manual transmission in my car doesn't do me any favors at a drag strip. I can tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so when GM goes to the Nurburgring, they never go by themselves. There's always someone there, correct? Like it's not another manufacturer of some kind.
Oh no, yeah. It's industry pool is all the manufacturers. I mean, I couldn't tell you 20 or 30. And there's set times. At the beginning of the year, you'll get a schedule for that year of which 2 weeks in that month is going to be, and that track is totally dedicated to the manufacturers, except for May. There's only 1 week because of the 24-hour race. And then we know, but it's everybody's there. I mean, it's count the number of manufacturers and they're all there. I mean, it's 20, 25, 30, and each of them have several cars, and it really adds up. So whenever you're out there, the only time you get to run by yourself is when you're running for time.
Right. So, Jim, question for you on that. A lot of people often talk about, there's a bias to, Corvette or to America in general, at the ring, and that there's a favorite, or favoritism played to other manufacturers, European. I mean, based on what you just said, it seems like it's probably more the luck of the draw of weather and when your time is and all that than anything. Is that true, or do you think there is?
No, the Nurburgring guys, I mean, the officials, and I remember I don't even know if he's still there, Mr. Schumacher, they were always good to us. Again, we had a liaison who had the German handshake. I tell you what, I could tell you stories. He got me out of trouble so many times. I would never think that they were favoring anybody else, except when I told you that story about and I don't know this for sure, but when I told you that story about the C7 ZR1, we run up there like a bunch of Keystone cops. Porsche pulls up in a semi and roll out 5 tire ovens with tires cooking in the oven. Now, whether they put them in the ovens an hour ago or whether they had them in there all day long, and we're sitting there with floor jacks, and I think we had battery powered wrenches, but they had a quick hoist, and the car was sitting on the hoist. And when they got their time to go, it was 4 guys were ready. 4 guys took the tires out of the oven, put them on the car. 4 guys ran in the lug nut, dropped the hoist. He was gone in like 20 seconds. It became a joke to us. It's like, holy shit, we're sitting here with and here they come with tires and ovens. You did wonder if in an hour they could get that kind of setup together, but that was the only time we thought about something like that. But I went to Nurburgring for 18 years, and they were always really good to us.
So, Jim, did you have any hand in the C8 Corvette?
No. My boss came to me and asked me, you got to decide between the C8 and the C7 ZR1. I said, nobody else is driving the C7 ZR1 at the ring but me, because I would have had to give up that car. Plus, in the back of my mind, I knew I was going to retire, and plus there's some personality differences between generations. Sure. Let's just put it that way.
Sure.
And I just, so it was perfect timing to do the C7 ZR1, then giddy up and get out of there.
Have you driven a C8?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
No.
Just what you know about a C8 then. I feel like I probably know the answer to this though. Between the C7 and the C8 generation, do you have a favorite?
Well, I don't dislike the C8. I think it's a great, beautiful car. C7 has always been my favorite. I own a C6.
Right.
The C7 just looks pissed off coming at you. And it did everything right. And, and I had mentioned it in a different video that I made, is that when they were building up to the C8, I asked people, I said, every time that we take the C7 to a shootout with a mid-engine car with comparable weight and horsepower, we always beat it.
Right.
We always beat it. And so, and I remember I got in trouble with the I'm worried thing, and I was worried not for what we did, but for everything else I drove. And I drove a lot of mid-engine cars because I did go through this round robin of mid-engine cars in preparation to C8 as a, they were gathering data, on a bunch of different guys. And every car I drove, I'm like, we had 4 or 5 mid-engine cars. We bought some, we rented some, and I think we had a C7 C51 and a C7 Z06, and both the C7s were always faster. Actually, I was surprised the way some of these cars drove. So that's when I got the I'm worried comment. I wasn't worried about the C8. I just hope we had the talent to out-engineer whoever engineered the cars that I had driven, because they wouldn't have stood up to the front engine architecture.
So you worked mostly on the C6 and the C7, is that right?
Yeah.
And you have a C6 Z06 or?
Z6 Grand Sport. C6 Grand Sport.
Yeah. I know a good friend of mine, Kevin Horan. I don't know if you know the name or not. I know you did a MagRad calibration for him.
Yeah, it definitely rings a bell.
Yeah. And
he's like in Virginia or something?
No, he's from Buffalo.
Buffalo. Okay, I'm not even close.
I know the 2019s especially had an updated MagRad calibration, and that was at your hands as well. Without getting crazy technical, what kind of changes did you make in that MagRad calibration versus the ones that existed pre-19?
Well, the ones that existed, I'm going to try to say this without insulting anybody. We did a lot of tuning. Well, what I always did up until probably 2014 was, we had one of the supplier guys with us, and I'm just telling him what I'm feeling and how I want it, what I want to change from a driving standpoint. Not take this algorithm and modify it by this amount of PWM. I'm just saying, well, I'd like to have low speed motions, a little more control, and then high speed, and things like that. And then when I went to the Nurburgring in 2014 for the Z06, we needed to stay longer to do some ABS stuff, and my suppliers had to go home, and I said, give me the software. I'm going to figure this out. I can't stop working because I didn't have support. Over the next couple of years, I was looking at some of the algorithms going, why are we running current here when it's a wheel hop velocities when it's a body algorithm? And there was just things that didn't make sense to me, but I never had a chance to tear it all down and do it a different way, the way I not the way I thought it should be done. It just made most sense. So the C7 architecture had, if you go from from base car to ZR1, there was like 20 or 25, 28 different packages from chassis standpoint, and I was the only guy doing them. So I never had, it was just, one after the other. But then when the C7 ZR1, that was the only car I was responsible for because everything else was already released. Well, I said, okay, this is a car, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to build it up my way. And that came out so good. I said, holy shit, I got to retune them all. And so over like the next 3 or 4 months, I was out, I'm working 18 hours a day, redoing everything from the base car with M55 all the way through the Z06s, because I said, this is just too damn good to not get to the customer. And then when I got done there, I called the director of SPO and I said, you need to make these available to anybody who owns a C7 because it's that good. It's that much of a improvement. And they did it, but they didn't want anything to do with C6s. So that's when I said, okay, maybe let me take a look at the C6s and see if I can do the same philosophy. The C6 architect or software is not as advanced as C7, but just using the same philosophies, it was huge.
So
it's probably more of an answer than you really wanted.
No. I'm totally
Okay.
fine with that. Was your position at GM mostly just suspension related?
Yeah, I was just ride and handling. So it was development. We had design and release engineers who were just unbelievable. If I found something, I'd just beg them to make a late change for me. But I was at the proving ground, so I was just development in the car. Steering, chassis, tires, aero in conjunction with the wind tunnel guys to validate what they were seeing in the CFD and the wind tunnel. But for each particular component, say the steering rack or the tires or the all the hardware, mechanical for mechanical grip, there was release engineers. They're doing the real work, putting that stuff through, working with the suppliers and getting the designs, meeting their dates. And I'm just telling them what I want, and they're just doing it. And so I have great admiration for those guys because they made me look good. I didn't make their life easy.
How, like the relationship with you, Taj, and Harlan, how interactive was that during the course of the whole year, as opposed to, actual, tracks and getting down to the hard knocks at those times, and how was that relationship overall? I trust it sounds like it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, here's the story. In 1988, I got my first ride, maybe 1989, I got my first ride and handling job on the Buick Regal, the W car platform. And if you remember, that program was the Buick Regal, the Lumina, the Cutlass Supreme, and the Grand Prix. And I started in the Buick Regal. I eventually got the Lumina, but sitting right next to me doing the Cutlass Supreme was Taj Juckner. We sat in the same office. It was like a bullpen office. We were both ride and handling engineers. I was doing the Buick and then the Chevy. He was doing the Oldsmobile. You can see how our careers progressed.
Yeah.
I had the same job on a different car. And then Taj was probably one of the best chief engineers on the planet. And that was a benefit of knowing Taj for 30 years. Is I said something to it. I had him right between the eyes. And I knew I didn't have to, sugarcoat things. I could go right at him like we were sitting next to each other. other back in 1990.
Mhm.
And that helped a lot. And actually, I knew Harlan once. Harlan did some stuff on the W car too, and then we split paths. And then, when I came back in the Corvette, it wasn't like Taj and I were talking every day. It was usually once a week. We had a meeting at the proving grounds they all came out for. And Taj never went to the track. The first time he was at the Nurburgring was he rode in that ZR1 with Gavin. But he knew enough to get, whenever we asked for anything, he never denied us it. I mean, it didn't matter how much it cost. I could just give him a quick explanation, and that's all he needed to hear. And we had it. It wasn't a dig that he wasn't at any of the tracks, because he's the chief engineer of the Corvette. He's probably got more important things to do when we were probably doing pretty good at the track. But he never denied us anything. He never held us back. And there were a lot of other executives who wanted to, but Taj never did. And Harlan, I mean, what more do you say about Harlan? He's, people don't appreciate their interaction with the customer and making, the customers not, get knowledgeable and knowing that somebody actually really cares about them than Harlan. And Harlan, he had technical expertise. Harlan's an engineer. Like, I couldn't have done Harlan's job because I don't have his knack for being able to just strike up conversations and, just be there making people feel comfortable. So Harlan was absolutely gold. And Harlan was the biggest fan of engineers doing the lap times. He loved when they were getting, the other guys were hiring pros, and we just had, hey, here's Jim Nobody, who's our development engineer, running for time. And the first one was the best one, because when we broke that record, it was one of my heroes, Walter Roll's lap time in the Carrera GT. I think he was 6:28, and when we went 7:28, and we were 7:26. That was a big deal for me, because Porsche was just sitting out there as the iconic car, and we did it. And since then, ever since then, Harlan, he just looked at me and go, I like that we do with engineers.
Yeah. I think the entire Corvette community likes that you do it with engineers, because even though you guys are very capable drivers, you're not professional drivers. So you doing it as fast or faster than some of the professional drivers makes us feel even better about these cars.
And I think there's guys there who could still do it, who probably should still do it.
Yeah.
But I'm not making the calls. I had to defend my turf against several pros.
A question for you. I think that myself and everybody is always curious about. So when a new version or gen is coming out, like, we'll take C7, right? So there's a C7 base, C51, Z06, and ZR1, and all of that really has to be pre-engineered up front when, the chassis, when everything's sort of being laid out, right? The knowledge of what each successive product is going to have to accommodate is sort of has to be built from, day one almost, right? And the question is the suspension and all the other decisions all known that early on with the base car, that the ZR1 is going to do X, Y, and Z with this type of, change in suspension and setup and performance package of suspension and tires? Or is it an iteration of, you kind of know, you don't know it all, but, the C7 base and Z51, and we know that the Z06 and CR1 are going to, sort of evolve, and we're going to learn and we're going to maximize. I'm just curious how that plays out.
With the C6 to C7, Taj said, okay, give me a list of what you want for C7. And I did, and he gave it all to me. I love my C6, but the engineering, the C7 is so much more advanced, 500% stiffness steering wise, body torsional and things like that. Obviously, 2014, you have the Z51, 2015, you have the Z06. So we knew the wide body architecture was coming there. We knew we had a pretty good idea what kind of power it was going to be making. And it's all a common, I don't know for sure, but we knew about the ZR1 back in 2011 or whenever we started bringing up that program. But we knew the architecture, and to the best of our ability, we accommodated for that. And, I think it turned out okay.
You told us a little bit about your relationship with Taj and Harlan. Now that you're retired, and those two are mostly retired, it seems, do you guys still talk?
Yeah, I spoke with Harlan quite a bit when he left GM. trying to convince him that they did him a favor because I said, I asked him, do you ever met somebody who regretted retiring? I mean, who just doesn't like it? The answer is no. We had a lot of conversation that way. And Taj is since he retired, it's mostly text because I think he's up at his place in Frankfort, Michigan, further north. And Kirk and I play golf occasionally, but it's not, I wouldn't say that they're my inner circle of friends simply because the logistics don't allow it. We're doing our thing, they're doing their thing, and they don't match.
Sure.
I mean, I do boating and golf, and I'm sure Tad has no interest in a boat or playing golf, and that's my world right now.
Do you still drive?
No. I drive well, I mean, other than we talked about going to Ohio, I have had a lot of people offer to let me drive their cars at tracks, but I've got this rule, it's called shit happens.
Yeah.
That if I was in somebody else's car, even if it wasn't my fault, I don't think I could take it if I got into an accident. Sure. So I started racing cars in '83 and I finished Corvette in 2018. And I think for some other magazine, I think they asked me to estimate how many laps you did, and it was like 40 or 50,000.
Oh yeah, wow.
And I got my time in, and not that I wouldn't want to do it, but it's just I owe my wife was an angel during all this time. I'm more into being with her than doing the car. Don't get me wrong, I would love to do it, but it's our time now.
You still do just like spirited driving.
Yeah. The roads in Ohio that I talked about, and I can send you guys a link to the map I made of it.
That'd be awesome.
Second to go into a racetrack, and we go down there. We go down there for a week. Go Monday, come home Friday, and we probably did it for 20 or 30 weeks all through the years. Nothing got me more excited than walking out of that hotel in the morning knowing we were going to be driving these roads, developing steering and shocks and things like that. So I still enjoy doing that. My wife doesn't go. When we take a bunch of guys down there, my wife won't go. It sucks doing it, beating the crap out of your own car, but that's kind of what we do. Yeah, it's easy, but much better doing it in a company car.
Well, so but one thing,
we run them as hard as we did back then.
One thing I noticed, I got to talk a lot to Kirk at the most recent NCM bash.
Kirk Binion?
Yeah, and I noticed he has a C6 Z06 carbon, I believe.
Yes, 2011. Yeah, he's got. Yeah, I've worked with him on that car.
And then you have a C6 Grand Sport. What is it about the C6?
Well, see, I bought my Grand Sport it was like a proof of concept for what I was doing for my business.
Oh yeah.
So
okay.
And so I bought that for that. And I can't speak for Kurt why he's got one. I will say I think the C6 styling is timeless.
Yeah, a lot of people say that.
I think it is. Even though I still like the C7 better for some reason, it's like an F16. It just looks smashed.
See, I think I think the C7 is timeless too. I don't think the C8 is. Now, not to start any kind of weird arguments here, but I love the C8 Corvette. I have a C8 Z06. I think it's a fantastic looking car, but I think in 20, 30 years from now, it's going to be one of those cars that people don't understand where the styling came from. I agree. I think the C6 and the C7 out of all of the Corvettes have what I would call the nicest design.
And I tell people that, when back in the day when they had the factory team ALMS, you go to like Laguna Seca or any of those racetracks and Lamborghinis or Ferraris would come out, the Porsches are buzzing around. And then it sounded like the world was coming to an end. Trees were falling down, and it was those two Corvettes.
Yep.
The C6 and the C7s. You always knew where they were on the track just by the sound. And when they were staging the cars for the race, any other team, there would be 10 or 11 people. And those two Corvettes would there'd be 50, 60, 100 people around right on the front straightaway where they were staged. I mean, it was really cool.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about a C9 in terms of what that might be like, or where the
man? That's a good question. I didn't think I'd be alive when they were talking about C9s. They got to be thinking about it because what 2020, and we're going into
model year 26.
Yeah, we're going to model year. We're 6 years into it, so there's got to be something on paper. I have no clue what they would do. They really engineered the C8 good. I mean, there's nothing wrong, from an engineering standpoint. So I don't know if it's going to be styling, but with technology coming in, maybe embracing. Like, I gotta hope there's never an all electric Corvette. But
I think we're all on the same same
But
page there.
I think it's just embracing, and then maybe some style. Maybe they'll go back to a smooth body like the C6. Because I wasn't involved with the engineering of the CA, they have to improve it. They have to improve. The next generation isn't improved from the previous, then you go out of business. But I don't, it's a really well engineered car.
So getting back to Nurburgring stuff, the C7, I'm not going to worry too much about the C7 Stingray, but the C7, we'll say Grand Sport, Z06, and just the Grand Sport and the Z06 for the C7 generation. Those cars, the times that those got, are those times pretty solid? Or did you have the same kind of problems with those cars that you did with the ZR1?
Those are solid times.
Those are solid. Okay. So the ZR1 is the only one that's a little bit iffy.
Yeah. But, okay, so you have a segment time in the industry, but then you start adding a fast lap segment time into it. Then they start becoming somewhat unattainable because now you're taking all the best segments, and if you don't hit it, but then you're adding the one time, like in the C6 ZR1. When I added I had the 2 laps in that car. I think the segment went down to a 717. So we ran 719. But when I put the 279, ran a 720 then 719. Then when I put those 2 laps in and segmented those, then you got a 717. Then it starts become that you say perfection. We're all human.
Right.
I said once, if you ever ask any driver if you ran a perfect lap, the answer is no.
Yeah.
The Z06 was, we were segmenting like a 711.5 and I went 710, and then you put the 710 lap into the segment program, then you're like 708.
You're right. Yeah.
So I guess if you were really you worked long enough at it, you could probably do a 708.
Yeah.
And same with the, that was one of the things I wrestled with when I was doing the C6s is do we run the ZR1 again and try to go faster, which, the segment times tell me it could, but the Z06 is sitting there at a 742.9, and I said, so what if we go, the goal was to get under 720.
Yeah.
We did that. And then let's get the Z06, from that 742 time and get it back down. We were at 722 with that. And the Grand Sport, the C7 Grand Sport was that's kind of the car that makes everybody feel like a rock star. I mean, if you look at that car was 1 second slower than the C6 ZR1 on PS2 tires.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
almost 200 less horsepower.
Yeah. That's a hell of an accomplishment for sure.
Hey, Jim, I have a question for you. So I listened to an interview with Harlan, I guess, about 2 months ago, and he had talked about the moment when, I guess, the C7 plans, which was supposed to be the mid-engine, were sort of dashed because of the financial crisis. And, that was, a late night phone call, I think, from Taj to him basically saying, hey, I've got some news for you. We're going to table the mid-engine for the C7, and our orders are to basically just, keep the C6 going with some changes, so to speak, refreshes. And, he tells the story that the C7 really, they started with quote refreshes and then just kept going. And then frankly said, we can actually do a whole new car and not really have to tell a whole lot of people till we're done. And that became the C7. But when did you, if you remember, when did you find out that same news? And what was it like to hear that, this thought of a mid-engine was not going to be in the C7?
Well, first of all, I remember working on the first mid-engine, going just at that point, we were just going through performance metrics, attainables, things like, how, we have a lot of metrics for handling and stuff, and we were populating, what we wanted the car to be. We never had property. So it was more doing that. And I can't exactly remember how or when I found out. I'll step back. When we were doing that, I was on Corvette for just 1 or 2 years. I inherited the C6. I inherited the C51, and I took over on the Z06. And it was only a year or two later, they were talking mid-engine. And luckily, there was a lot of smart people around me. But I was worried that I was a little out of my, if I'm going to cut my teeth, I'm going to cut them hard. And so personally, it was almost a relief for me to thinking, okay, I'm going to be able to go through another generation of a front-wheel drive car while I can educate myself on the mid-engine architecture. Like I said, it was a relief for me because I just knew that there was a steep learning curve I was going through just on Corvette. Then there was a steeper curve to go to mid-engine. And then, okay, now I got another 1.5 years with the C6. And then I knew everything I wanted to change for C7. And then I'm pretty sure Tad's talked about this a few times. I think there was one part between those two cars that was common. It was like a trunk latch.
It was
Everything else in the C7 was new.
the roof latch. Yeah, I remember that video actually.
Yeah. And so, but then when we started getting properties and started putting this together, and when they made the and like I say, the design engineers, the guys doing the body structure and the guys doing the steering stiffness, when they started putting these torsional stiffness, and we got properties, like, holy crap, man, this thing is I love the C6. I own one. Man, this is going to be light years ahead of it. And then we realized that we kind of got a winner.
Yeah. Well, maybe it all worked out then, because we would have missed the last front engine C7 generation, which obviously would have been a shame in retrospect.
I think it did. I think that the C7 deserves its place in history as a great car. And it would have been a bummer if we went to C6 to mid-engine, because not only we had 9 more years to perfect a mid-engine car now.
Right.
I mean, it was C7 was 14 through now. We had 5 more years to educate ourselves on how to do, and I think it showed.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to wrap this up then, Jim. Once again, Jim, Joe, I appreciate both of you being on the channel. Jim, I think you really helped answer a lot of questions today that the C7 and C8 crowd are going to have for Magnetic Ride, Nurburgring. I honestly can't think of another question I could ask. So big thank you. Really appreciate you jumping on here with us.
Yeah.
But Jim, really appreciate having you on here. Hopefully I get to talk to you again soon. I think
anytime, man. I love talking Corvettes with Corvette people.
Same here. So awesome stuff, guys. Smash the thumbs up if you like the content. Leave your questions down below if you have any. And as always, guys, stay obsessed.